Hi there, and welcome to Ending Age-Related Diseases 2020. I'm here with futurist David Wood, who was also a mobile phone pioneer, or was. It's probably a bit of both, but he's now well known for his commentary on science and futurism and all things technological. So we're going to have a chat with him today. Welcome, David. How are you?
Thanks so much. It's a great conference. I'm really glad to be taking part.
Yeah, it's great to have you here as well. And I'm sure the audience will enjoy some of the things that we're going to talk about today. Okay, so the first question is going to go back a little bit in time. As a smartphone industry pioneer, you spent over 25 years envisaging, designing and creating smart devices. What sparked your interest in biotechnologies for healthy longevity? And was there a defining moment that you recall?
All right, back into history. I guess I was the same as almost everybody in having a split mind, a dual personality as regards the desirability for living much longer lives. I think we've all got these battling selves. Part of us from a young age thinks that aging and death is absurd and we should somehow be free of it. But another part of us says that any such aspiration is selfish, youthful, immature, egotistical, and that it's wrong to try and expect lots more than the average. So what is it that causes some people to hold on to the vision that something can be done about aging and death? And I think it's to the extent to which people have independent thoughts and they're happy to be mavericks. So in my studies, I studied theoretical physics, and that shows you the world's a lot weirder place than is commonly supposed, relativity and quantum mechanics. Then I studied philosophy of science, and that showed me again that people's views on what was possible, what was sensible, changed a lot over the centuries. And that laid the seeds for me working in the mobile computing and smartphone space, where over a number of years I saw slow change followed by fast, dramatic change. And that gave me more confidence to expect that other fields of science could have similar transformations. And then, I'm not quite sure when, I came across an article written by I.J. Good, sometimes known as Jack Good, written about 1965, in which he looked ahead to an even bigger transformation in human capabilities. He said, imagine there's such a thing as an ultra-intelligent computer, which is exceeding humans in all cognitive capabilities. Well, one of the cognitive capabilities is the ability to design a computer. So that first super intelligent, actually he used the word ultra intelligent machine, would then be able to build a better ultra intelligent machine. And in turn, that would be able to build a yet more improved. Hence, such a device would be the last invention that we humans need to make, and all kinds of problems that had been holding us up previously would then fall into our grasp. When I read these words, a shudder went down my spine, and I thought, you know what? This is a vision that may well come true within my life. There can be bigger changes. I should no longer be confined by ordinary thoughts as to what may be possible in that. And that opened my mind further to the possibilities of radical changes in all aspects of humanity, including significantly enhanced health spans.
Great answer. And yeah, it's. I've heard this before about computers becoming more advanced by then building more advanced computers. It's quite a common theme in science fiction writing, but there's no reason why it couldn't occur in real life. And they often do say that science reality often mirrors science fiction. So I'm just waiting for those jetpacks and those teleporters that we were promised on Tomorrow's World in the middle 80s. Still
to be
hasn't
clear,
happened
most
yet.
futurists didn't forecast flying cars and these jetpacks, and that was more Hollywood and science fiction writers who had various humorous or entertainment purposes in mind. What responsible futurists talked about was something a bit different. But this isn't just something in the future. It has been the story of history. The Industrial Revolution was machinery which could build better tools, which could help us to build better machinery, which helped us to build better tools. The second industrial revolution, from about the 1880s onwards, included an explosion in the possibility of synthetic chemicals. And the more synthetic chemicals we produce, the more reactive compounds we had to build yet more synthetic chemicals. It's been the same with computers. We actually have been using computers to help us design and build more computers, and we've been using software to help us design and build better software. So smaller groups of people nowadays, don't laugh, can actually build much higher quality software with much less effort because we take advantage of software. And now we're seeing increasingly the start of what I just described. We are seeing more and more AI being built by people using AI tools. So there is a positive feedback cycle which is getting underway. Humans are still in the loop, but as humans are required less and less, that feedback cycle is going to accelerate. So this is not some future vision. It is an extension of a trend we can see now. And every field will be transformed by this, including drug discovery, including understanding of human biology, including an awareness of the most effective methods to undo the damage accumulated by aging.
Yeah, and people often say that, oh, aging's too complicated to do something about. Well, there's one thing that computers are very good at is handling complexity. So I actually feel that in research, AI in its proper usage, not like the science fiction, I can't allow you to do that. You know, not Hal from Space Odyssey, but the proper actual research AI is already sort of paying dividends for drug discovery. It's taking people away from mundane tasks, automation in the lab, microfluidics. It's all speeding up. So it's great. So I'm pretty positive about the impact of AI in the research, especially not just aging, but just broadly across all the sciences, really. I think it's going to pay dividends, and it already is. So, yeah, it's great. I'm very positive about that side of things. So, for me, imagining the future isn't really that hard. Although what is a little bit harder is to have an accurate picture of that future that will be good for good grounds for decision making. So, as a futurist, what are your favorite tools when it comes to imagining how rejuvenation technologies can change the world and our society?
Well, it's a very big topic, but I'll try and pick out one example. I actually think all of us, everybody on the planet, needs to become better at foresight skills, just the same as we'd argue everybody should become knowledgeable about philosophy, should appreciate some of the basics of engineering and economics. I think we all need to become better at foresight. In particular, foresight is not a crystal ball. We cannot say categorically what will happen in the future. There are far too many uncertainties. There's the butterfly effect, where a small butterfly flapping its wings can have the impact cascaded into a tornado at the other side of the planet. That's a real phenomenon. But we can point to trends, and we can point to patterns, and perhaps the most important pattern is the pattern that sometimes you get slow change followed by fast change. This isn't just exponential curves, although that's something to do with it. It's to do with something more profound that goes on. And the person I credit this with isn't somebody who called himself a futurist. He called himself a technology marketer. His name is Geoffrey Moore, not Gordon Moore. Geoffrey Moore, a different person, who wrote about this phenomenon, talking about actually most companies, most startups in every field, they don't go through slow followed by fast. They go slow followed by death. Death in what's known as the valley of death or the chasm of despair. And it's worth understanding why this is the case. And Geoffrey Moore's book, called Crossing the Chasm, is still good to read, even though it's probably about 20 years old now. He points out that people fall in a spectrum. This is well known, a spectrum of how likely we are. I'm trying to draw a normal curve here. And the curve is indicating how likely we are, each of us, to adopt a new idea. And at the beginning, there are the so-called technology enthusiasts who will pick up something just because it's cool. And we don't worry about applications. We just like it because we are geeks. After that, there's a group called the early adopters. And these are the ones who get interested in an idea because it has an application, and they are willing to roll up their sleeves, get involved in the debugging, the IS support calls. They don't mind too much that it's hard to do. They are willing to do that hard work themselves. After that, People talk about the early majority, the late majority, and then the laggards. The laggards are the people who only buy in when all the old products have stopped. Geoffrey Moore's key insight is that along the way, there is a big separation. After you get enthusiasm from an early group, the early adopters, you need a different kind of solution to appeal to the mainstream. Because people in that mainstream, even the early majority, they are looking not for something that is strange. They are looking for something that other people like themselves are already using. They look for validation, not in some technical journals, but they look for other people like them using the product already. And so it has to be usable. It has to be socially good too. And most companies don't adapt their own marketing. They get carried away in the beginning and then they get bogged down. Sometimes this is called, there is a slow change followed by death. But when you get it right, when you do cross that chasm, if you're sufficiently focused, if there is something practical that a small niche buys into, then the field can explode and you get slow change followed by fast change. And that's what can happen, I believe, in the whole field of rejuvenation biotechnology. We are, to an extent, in the chasm now. We have a lot of people around the world who are happy to identify as technology geeks or even early adopters who say this is a good initiative. But most of the world looks around a bit embarrassed. And if you ask them, would you like to live healthily to the age of 200? They'll sort of say, oh, no, not me. No, none of my friends would say such a thing, so I'd better not say such a thing either. But when we get that breakthrough, things could change so much more quickly than people expect. So the cause of fast change isn't just new technology, it's often a breakthrough in social awareness. Think how quickly eventually we came as a society to be comfortable with the idea of same-sex marriage. Of course, the laggards still aren't comfortable with it, but suddenly, relatively overnight, that changed. Think again how quickly the idea of Black Lives Matter took off in just a short time after many years of people saying, yeah, I guess that's important, but I won't get involved. Now more and more people have. I think it's going to be the same with adoption of rejuvenation technology, provided these early applications are shown to be good. People can see that they are working in various regards. They won't solve all the problems of aging. You were exactly right, Steve, earlier when you said aging is incredibly complicated, but they will solve enough of it, or even just one chunk. The people will say, hang on, I am now willing to be bolder. I'm willing to say that this is something I believe in and I wish more social funding, more public funding, more private funding is applied to it.
I think you're right about the stage we're at. We are gaining ground. I've got to say there has been a significant increase in interest and support, probably only in the last 4 years, I would say. 4 years ago, looking back, and the difference between then and now is tangible. I think it all started to really change from my perception when Senolytics really started to gain public interest, and things sort of went up a gear. I'm noticing now that there are far more academics now stepping up to say, yeah, there is something we can do about aging. Whereas upon 10, 15 years ago, if you even dared suggest that in academia, it was, you might as well just write your career off and just hand your notice in, because it could literally cost you your job. I've been told by various researchers from, some of the institutions who I'm not going to obviously name them, but I certainly know that it's a phenomenon. So I think from that side point of view, certainly in research, the academics and the scientists, the tune has very much sort of changed. There are what did you call them? The laggards. That phenomena exists even in researchers. There are some diehards who are like, oh no, Aubrey was wrong, blah blah blah. But there's more people saying, yeah, Aubrey might not be right about everything, but he's probably right about enough. Let's try it, and I think that's great. So there's been a bit of a sea change from my perception, anyway. So that's really positive. And talking about positive things, what would you personally say that the individual and societal benefits would be of longer, healthier lives if we can achieve that through rejuvenation biotechnology?
So there are the humanitarian arguments and there are the economic arguments, and both are important. The humanitarian argument is basically just to acknowledge that freedom is good, that life is good, that choice is good, that the ability to continue having experiences is good. And few people will deny that. But most people at the back of their mind think, well, there's an economic argument why people need to get old and die, because if there are more people, it's going to be somehow bad for the planet, bad for society. And this is where we need to step up our arguments for what more and more people are calling the longevity dividend 2.0. It's the argument that actually it will be financially good for society and actually even beneficial for the planet if we are keeping people healthier much longer. And if people are healthier, they are not only contributing as providers in the economy, they are contributing also as on the demand side of the economy, but also they are able to be more innovative. What the planet most needs is innovation. The more people there are on the planet, it's not just more mouths to feed and more waste being produced, it's also more ideas. And when people remain healthier, vibrant, networked for longer, we will be more able to tap into their accumulated wisdom and also the fresh ideas of new generations. We'll be able to mix up these ideas and come up with better, more secure, more sustainable solutions for what I call sustainable superabundance. And I want that argument to be clear, and I want that argument to be more and more in the public mind in the few years ahead.
Yes, it's definitely important for us to sort of keep on top of these objections and things like that. I was saying earlier before we started that there is sometimes a tendency in the, should we say, the supportive community to sometimes, to a certain extent, hand wave away certain issues. And I think that's a mistake. You know, they'll say, oh, no, we don't need to worry about that. And they just say, look, we'll just do this and, you know, it'll be fine. You know, I think we do need to talk about the societal impacts and the challenges, because there's absolutely no way there won't be any. I mean, there's not going to be them. So it's best that we talk about it. And if nothing else, at least we are discussing it. We're being responsible through discussing it. And at the end of the day, if we're the people who are instrumental in developing these technologies, I think it's only appropriate that we also explore the ramifications. So, you know, no, some people suggest as an objection that ending aging and its associated diseases would make us less human. Do you feel that changing our biology so that we would live longer and healthier lives, do you think that would change what essentially being human is? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
There are two ways to answer this question. One is to say, oh, no, we'll still be more or less the same as today, except we'll happen to live longer. So that says there's only going to be one change. But I take a more controversial approach. I say, yes, this will involve giving up some parts of our human nature. And it is good that we will give up some parts of our human nature. Indeed, the core part of human nature is a desire to constantly improve on what we have inherited from nature. So if we look at what we've done over the last decades and centuries, we have improved human nature in smaller ways by vaccinations and antibiotics. We have improved human nature by contraceptions, birth control, Viagra, so many other things that we do. Education improves human nature by helping people to understand more. Forcing children to read and write improves their human nature. So I would say that the state of nature is one in which most women would have children every few years throughout their lives, and most of these children would die before their parents. That is not a nice state of nature. So I congratulate scientists, engineers, doctors, philanthropists, activists for improving on nature. Now, I don't want to lose the core parts of human nature. I don't want to remove many of the parts that make us truly wonderful conscious beings from time to time, but we shouldn't put human nature on a pedestal no more than we should put nature on a pedestal.
And you could also make the argument that change is inherently part of who we are or what we are as a species. So You know.
But we should look ahead and see where that change is taking us. So when people are more conservative, bioconservative or whatever, they are fearful that we might be unwittingly committing ourselves to a path, they call it a slippery slope, where we'll take a few steps and look attractive, but we'll end up regretting where we have got to. And that is a serious concern, and futurists are very much in the business of foreseeing bad possible consequences as well as good consequences. We're in the business of helping people to set aside some of their initial instincts, whether it's an instinct that says, wow, wonderful, or another instinct that says, yuck, horrible. Both of these three-letter words, wow and yuck, are grounded in our past experiences, which may no longer be relevant in a future state. So I do paint two pictures of the future. For example, we briefly show this book, Sustainable Superabundance, a Universal Transhumanist Invitation. The word transhumanist means going beyond inherited human nature, transcending our limitations. I don't just paint the positive future in there. I very much, in each chapter, point to the bad things that could happen. So rather than an abundance of good things, there can be, I call it, a preponderance of unhelpful, dangerous elements. And we have to see each of these scenarios, and we have to figure out how we can avoid the scenarios that are, on reflection, and truly bad for humanity. And we have to figure out how we can accelerate progress towards the positive, beneficial, sustainable superabundance scenarios.
Yeah, it's all to be played for. There's good and bad. It's like people say, "Oh, well, we shouldn't develop the classic thing that we have sometimes as an objection or a concern is the old Immortal dictators thing. We shouldn't develop technology X because a dictator might use it." Well, yeah. But one can make the argument with most forms of technology. Most technology could be abused. Electricity in the hands of someone with good intentions, it can power cities. It can achieve, which can achieve great things. In the hands of someone who's up to no good, you could use it to torture people. It's in that, it's about shaping people to be responsible with the technology. And I don't ever think we're going to get away from the whole idea of immortal dictators. That's just human nature. There's always somebody who's going to want to sit on top. But I don't think it's a valid reason not to develop healthcare technology just because somebody you don't like might use it. I think that's an example of bad rationale.
The problem with immortal dictators isn't the immortal bit, it's the dictatorship bit. It's that society loses the ability to supervise the people we've got in charge. I mean, the great thing about democracy, despite all its limits, is that you can vote out people who've come into power. And if we lose that ability, then we are in trouble, regardless of whether the dictator lives another 8 years or another 800 years. So we have to fix politics more than worrying about ramping down technological possibilities. Having said that, there are some technologies I do want us to be very careful with. Some of the technologies that could enable people to create bioweapons do need to be very carefully controlled. You just need 0.1% of the human population to be sufficiently fanatical and sufficiently disturbed to want to create such a bioweapon. If the technology improves and is accessible, you will have members of the IS or Aum Shinrikyo from Japan or some other new grouping who get a hold of it and do terrible things to humanity. So we do need some control over some technologies. We just need to discuss carefully, democratically, openly, and constructively where these limits should be and where they should not be. And there is no reason at all to restrict the development of biorejuvenation technologies.
Exactly. No argument from me there. Definitely not. So, but as you say, responsible application of technology and guidance should be the centerpiece of what we as a movement sort of foster. And hopefully we can guide people towards, using those technologies responsibly rather than creating an immortal army of clones, which would probably make a good movie, but probably not a good poster child for the movement, right?
So we do need to paint positive pictures of the future, because unless we have our own white mirror scenarios of the future, we'll be dominated by what we've seen in terms of black mirror.
Yeah.
And we do have a situation in which storytelling is usually more popular when there are bad guys in it. So we have to elaborate scenarios, which again is what I try to do here. As well as picking out the bad things that could happen and which we have to stop, I try to be a little bit more expansive in my description of how this future society, it wouldn't be just us sitting on clouds strumming harps all day. It'll be a world still with lots of challenges, still with lots of tensions, stresses, but there will be challenges, stresses, and tensions that we can by and large cope with, rather than ones that drive people into existential despair, as often happens today.
Yeah, there's plenty of that about. So some people suggest that this is regarding another concern, and that is the concern of access. And a lot of people, especially within the community, raise this issue. They suggest that some people suggest that we may see a trickle down of the prices in these new therapies, as we do with consumer products, such as electronics, phones, computers, and so on. However, medicine and access to it doesn't always work the same, really, and history shows us that it is a little bit different to consumer goods. You've only got to look at pharma, or big pharma, as some people call it, to see how many patented drugs have remained costly for years, even decades, before they become affordable after becoming generic. And this is a real concern for, obviously, what we're doing in rejuvenation biotechnology, because we're going to be relying on pharma infrastructure, obviously, to produce these things. So how can we, as a sort of industry, as a community, how can we sort of tackle this problem of access and affordability, in your view?
So you're right that it's quite common to say, don't worry, prices inevitably decline. And that's an argument I was heavily involved with for many years in my role in the early smartphone industry. When Symbian, the operating system that my teams helped to create in the late 1990s and early 2000s, when that was first included in devices from companies such as Nokia, Ericsson, Motorola, they were expensive, very expensive. But we drew charts that predicted the decline in all the components and said that in due course, the costs would come down, and eventually there would be good phones available with lots of function for just $100. Shock horror, which is unbelievable at the time. But that has happened, and they've gone a lot lower. So the pattern is there. When the free market works well, it works wonders. But the free market doesn't always work. There are many instances of market failures. There is not just one lesson in economics, which is let's have plenty of competition and we will always have good solutions. The second lesson is that things go wrong when you get monopolies or cartels or asymmetries of information, where you get externalities whose costs are not included properly. The market does lots of bad things. And the solution is, in a healthy society, mixed market economy, when the private enterprise does lots of things, but from time to time politicians intervene to reset, just as American politicians busted various trusts in the 1880s onwards, just as the Department of Justice intervened from time to time, just as the EU is trying to stand up to what Facebook and the other social media giants are doing now. And that's necessary. And in order to be sure that there are healthy low prices for this rejuvenation biotechnology, it will be necessary to have good politics as well. And I'm going to wave another couple of books, I'm sorry. When I wrote this book, The Abolition of Aging, back in 2016, at the end I started listing what are the things that could go wrong, what could fail. And the things that most worried me were all about politics. They were about society becoming more divided. They were about society becoming more partisan. They were about people being less rational. So the next book I wrote after that is this rather large book, transcending politics, in which I said that society can use some of the technologies of AI and blockchain and so on to have a better politics, and therefore make it more likely that the incredible technologies of the fourth industrial revolution, nanotech, biotech, infotech, and cognitech, could be used for positive benefit for all rather than just shoring up the 1%. And since I wrote both these books, the risks of greater inequality have not gone away. And although some things have become cheaper and more easy to access, you're exactly right that healthcare issues in some parts of the world are terribly divided. So we can't take it for granted, and we need better politicians ensuring that from time to time they can guide and flex the market. Now, we might get away with it. We might be able to just have the market driving the costs lower, but that would be irresponsible to say, let's do that. We need, at the same time, to get people in politics at all levels aware of the issues here and campaigning to make things freely available, seeing that everybody will benefit if these are made available. And thankfully now in the COVID crisis, more and more countries are saying we've got to make these vaccines freely available. We need to make tests freely available, not as in some countries in the beginning of the crisis when people had to pay for these, pay lots of money, which deterred them and meant that they went around in an infectious state without wanting to be tested. When the costs come down, everybody benefits, but that doesn't happen automatically. It does require good political leadership.
So on that note, I'd like to thank David for sharing his thoughts with us today. We could probably do a whole conference just with David.
I'm more than happy to come back next year and do an update. And next year, perhaps we might even be next to each other, standing shoulder to shoulder, rather than enjoying the fruits of modern technology as we are.